And if you want to hear me, I'll turn on my power. There we go. Can you hear me now? I called it back to order at 6 o'clock, our 2022 October 10th study session. And all council members are present. Tonight, we're going to switch items 1 and 2. So we will take item number 2, Heritage Park remediation update first. And I will call on Mike Dahlem.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll go ahead and introduce this and turn it
Okay.
over to Associate Engineer Lisa O'Haver.
No.
First up, we're going to talk about Heritage Park remediation. Public Works will be providing us an update on what the consultant has found and next steps moving forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to Elisa.
Morning or good evening, Mayor and council members. So I'm here to talk to you about Sumner Heritage Park remediation. Lisa O'Haver, Associate City Engineer. As you know, likely Heritage Park was used as a gas station from 44 through the 1990s. In the 1990, the gas tank was removed. However, there was some contaminated soil that was left when that was removed. City bought it, the property in 1994. And since then, we've performed some preliminary partial exploratory studies, 2010, 2011, and earlier this year in 2022. So why do we need to do anything about this? Main Street Vision in 21 identified the redevelopment of Heritage Park as priority number 1 of the Main Street Vision. So in order to redevelop Heritage Park, we've got to address this. With the Town Center Utility and Wooner project, it was recognized during the final design when we added Cherry Avenue there that we needed to address this before we put a nice, pretty concrete Wooner over this area. So to date, in June of this year, we came to council and requested a consultant services agreement for $104,000 to start down that path of remediation and exploring this and coming to a path forward. So since then, our consultant PBS has taken borings, samples, installed 5 monitoring wells in the last couple months, July and August. So what you see before you is approximate extensive contamination, and I will emphasize approximate. I think it's more of it's part art, part science. They take borings where you see there's bees, and then there's 5 monitoring wells. There's 1, 2's right in the middle of where the former gas station was, and then 3, 4, and 5. And those monitoring wells, we can continue to take samples from those to see what the contamination level is. And as we make steps towards remediation, how that has improved. The red line is approximate extensive contamination, and that depth is between 14 and 19 feet below the surface. The contaminants found were gasoline and benzene. So those can be attributed to the gas station. So options that were considered for remediation. First one is always on the table as do nothing. But in the past 30 years since that tank was removed, that contamination is still there. And in fact, you can see not only is it still there, it is come down Cherry. So that's the direction of the groundwater flow. It's coming south, southwest down Cherry. And the groundwater has carried that contamination. So it hasn't gotten better. It's stretched further in the last 30 years. So although do nothing is an option, it's not really a practical one. In order to redevelop Heritage Park in the future or for any of those other properties to develop potentially, this needs to be addressed, and it's the responsible thing to do. So a couple options were presented to us by our consultant. The first was excavating the contaminated material. In order to do that, we would have to excavate through approximately 14 feet of clean dirt to reach the dirty. By then, we're down about 20 feet into the groundwater through existing utilities, water, sewer, storm. We are the full width of Cherry and probably from the gazebo down to Maple, excavating all of that out. The $3 million number there is purely moving dirt. I think it's probably upwards of that when you think about you've got old structures on the west side of Cherry and they'd have to be dealt with structurally if you're digging a 20-foot hole next to them. So excavating. Second one is soil vapor extraction, which was basically we would be drilling approximately 20 monitoring wells around Cherry. Those would be plumbed together and then taken to a point in Heritage Park where there'd be a shack and it would be vented to atmosphere. That would remain in location for 3-5 years until the contamination was gone or to a level that would be acceptable. And then all of that would have to be decommissioned. The last one is remedial injections, which ended up being our preferred option. And I'll explain more on the next slide, but it's basically making injections of material into the contaminated zone. It's an option that doesn't require any infrastructure that will have to be kept in place or decommissioned after. It's scalable so that if we chose to go in and do a certain amount, we could do that amount, or we could do a lot depending on budget and schedule. It's kind of a get in, get out, quick and dirty, and then we can monitor it with the monitoring wells to see how did it affect what we did. So the remedial injections, like I said, contractor would come in, they would drill a bunch of little injection ports and release the solution at different intervals and depths below the surface. That would happen in the areas that we thought would be the most contaminated, and that would travel with the groundwater and address the contamination as it went. So it's basically a particle that's activated carbon that traps the contaminants and a microorganism that actually eats or dissolves the contaminants. So this handy dandy graph shows the cleanup process for Department of Ecology. We have completed site hazard assessment. We are working on remedial investigation. We hit a little bit of a hiccup in the fact that what Department of Ecology wants to see is this red circle closed, that we have clearly defined our limits of contamination, which we have not, because we expected this monitoring well down here to come out clean, and it did not. So in order to get through that step, we need to define our limits of contamination. So in order to do that, our consultant has recommended doing some remedial investigation or some remedial injections, seeing how it works and sampling again, and hopefully that monitoring well comes up clean after our first round, our pilot test. There's some other alternative options if that doesn't happen, but our consultant is pretty confident that it will. We could also just install another monitoring well further south, and that's potential as well. The consultant is currently scoped to do the feasibility study, and then we will be back in the future for the rest of this. So total cost that we know of right now, the current consultant services agreement is $105,000. We're requesting an amendment that'll be at council next week. $122,000 amendment. In the future, we will be back to ask for the following for an approximate total of $1 million. And that should get us to clean. But I will emphasize that this process is a bit iterative, that we will try this and adjust and shift as we move forward and we sample and we find out more.
All right. Do we have any questions? Councilmember Hochstetter.
How much gas leaking would it take to do this kind of mess?
That's a great question.
Because the tank was that far down?
Yeah, the bottom of the tank was about 12 feet deep.
And what do they do? Rust out?
It could have been leaking over the course of what, the 60 years it was there.
Okay, because I mean, nobody monitored those tanks back then. And so it just could have been accumulation of slow leak for a
Yeah.
long time.
Yeah.
Is there any way you can stop it from traveling? I mean, at that far end?
I think the best option that I've been presented with and talking with the consultant is this remedial injection that literally eats that contaminant.
It sounds like science fiction, doesn't it?
Right? It's like these microorganisms that are going to eat this. Yeah.
But they know it works.
Yes, it's been proven, been used in Western Washington significantly for this exact situation.
And on that other option, the one that you've eliminated with the shack, that just would have had to been part of the park for 5 years?
Yeah.
Okay, and this no one will really see? I
No.
mean, will it, I'm just envisioning tubes that come up?
No,
kind
there is nothing left. They'll come in, they'll do injections, and then when they're gone, they patch up the holes and they walk away.
of? They don't have to come back and reshoot it in the
Nope.
same thing?
Nope. We asked about the option of doing remedial wells where they would come back to the same location, and they said it's significantly more expensive to do it that way.
Okay. Okay, all right, well, thank you. It's very interesting and I'm glad they have some sort of solution.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you. Thank you. Once again, you did a good job at the Public Works Committee and we were very enthralled with this. I just noticed on this public participation, what do you hope to hear from the public? What, do we have a goal of getting something from them?
So that, you're referring to Department of Ecology's.
Yeah, the last little bullet with the bubble comment.
So this is their standard little process. And I have not been through this process, but my consultant has been. I don't know what we would expect, or if we would receive any public participation, but I believe there is an opportunity there if someone wants to participate.
Sure, I know that the city goes over or bends over backwards seeking public comment and giving public information out. So I'm assuming that you will do that at least. It's discouraging for us to not have anybody show up to most of our public hearings. And this is really a very interesting process. So it'd be kind of interesting to play it up big if you feel like doing that.
I'm sure we will have a Sumner Connects page, and I'll be working with Carmen on communication for that.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Newman.
Thank you. Emery, which fund gets used to pay for the work?
Thank you. So next week, you'll see action before you, an ordinance requesting a budget amendment for the initial 122,222,000 for the additional, is that for the additional monitoring?
Yeah,
Right.
That's for the pilot test.
And then so as we have been talking internally about these options and really reviewing what was the most cost-effective and successfully likely action going forward, we've been looking at how do we fund this. Really what we'll likely be recommending is, as I think most of council knows, on a monthly basis, we review our sales tax performance with our Finance and Personnel Committee. We track that monthly. We do trend analysis to take a forecast of where we're going to end up at the end of the year. Right now, it looks like we'll end up with just about $1 million over our budgeted estimate for sales tax at the end of 2022. And our initial recommendation is that that would be moved and earmarked to accomplish this as a priority of the council.
So general fund?
Yes.
Like the bulk, all of it basically out of the general fund.
Yep.
All right, and this is a spread over the next 2.5 to 3 years for that $1 million price tag total. Roughly, okay, thank you. And then is there a scale for acceptable levels of contamination? Like,
There is. So when they monitored or they took the samples, there is a threshold that if it exceeds that, then you've got to act on it.
Okay, and then so how much of it do we expect the remedial injections to take care of?
They should take care of all of it. If it does not, then we'll need to do some targeted, we'll be able to identify, maybe we have to do specifically in this area if we find that, okay, this contamination at the very center where the tanks were, maybe that needs some more targeted approach.
When you say all of it, do you actually mean all of it, or do you mean to get us back into an acceptable?
Backed into
range?
acceptable. I mean, I think anywhere you test, you're gonna
That's-
find
that's fair.
something. So
Right, because-
within acceptable.
And then how long does it take for those injections to work?
They start working immediately. It could take a couple months. So they will test over the next, after they do the injections, they'll do testing immediately before and after, a week later, 2 weeks after, and 4 weeks after. And they're hoping based on that, they will see enough progress that we can report to Ecology.
Okay, the closed circle.
Yep.
type thing, okay. And then how much does this, well, I guess I'm making the assumption that this sets back the winter timeline.
We are working through the details of that, of how those interact. Our goal is that we get these pilot test remedial injections in Cherry Avenue before they pave on Cherry. So that should be, if approved by council, we'll have the remedial injections done November or December, ahead of Cherry, which we have told they can't start working on Cherry until January.
So are we expecting additional costs on the winter side of things
Currently,
for
no.
delays?
We are
Okay.
not intending to delay them.
Okay, thank you.
I think Councilmember Newman, another way of looking at this is worst case scenario. We have talked, there is a potential of having to delay Cherry. We're cutting it off at a certain point, kind of working north, but maybe not completing all the way to the south, but we really don't know until we get this pilot test done. But we're hopeful. Everything our consultant's telling us is that we won't have to delay it.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Oh, Councilmember Hochstetter, Deputy Mayor.
So, what did we get from the $122,000 we paid the consultant? Was that the testing or?
We got a bunch of monitoring wells and samples. We got the borings, 5 monitoring wells, and the results delineating almost the extents of our contamination and what type of contamination we have.
So these are experts you called in that are specific to this kind
Yes.
of gasoline. I mean, you didn't know you were looking for gasoline though. did
No,
you?
well, we suspected as it was an old gas station, and there was preliminary studies in 2010, 2011, where they took some samples that allowed us to know what we would probably find. What they didn't do previously was create monitoring wells where we could go back and sample and see how things adjusted over time.
Mhm. And how long will they stay with us?
Our consultant or the
Mhm.
monitoring wells?
The consultant. I'm into the consultant.
Okay. The consultant currently is contracted through the feasibility study. So that was assuming that we would be able to capture everything and get our remedial investigation. Now we have this hole in our remedial investigation because we can't close the circle. So we have
do
to.
are they the ones who do the injecting or no? But they watch, they make sure you're getting it done right and stuff?
Yes, so they will be our counterpart interacting with Tacoma Pierce County Health Department, Department of Ecology. They will make sure that our preferred path is approved by them. They will design it. And then we will put it out to a separate contract for bid
Oh, for the actual
for the actual injections.
microbes and.
They will continue to monitor in the monitoring wells, taking samples to see how this contract that they designed performs and impacts the contamination.
Sounds like we're getting our money's worth. Thank you.
We are.
Right, anybody else? Councilmember Potato.
So, is there any relationship with the contamination between the Texaco station over here and the one, or whatever, across at Red Apple? Is any of that contamination, if the contamination is moving south, I know this is a little bit east,
Mhm.
so do you see any connections at all?
Not to the Red Apple site, no.
Okay.
The groundwater is moving from Main Street south towards Maple. Pretty much right along the line of Cherry,
Okay,
parallel with tracks.
okay. And then could anybody answer what is the status of the remediation at the Red Apple? Because it doesn't look like much is happening, but maybe like what your technology is, maybe we wouldn't see anything happening.
Our understanding is, they dug out quite a bit,
Mhm.
and they do have a plan. I don't know if they're gonna eventually go with the air sparge system or go with injections. But they plan on building that into, last we heard they're gonna go with air sparge, and they were going to build it into the design as they pour the foundation.
Okay,
So
so still hasn't been.
still hasn't been
total-
100% vetted.
Okay, well, that's.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Hmm, Seeing none. Don't see anybody online, so there you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Just a reminder, this will be on next week's regular council meeting for the budget amendment piece of that for the next phase of the consultant services agreement.
Okay, so now we're gonna go back to number 1, department budget presentations.
Okay, so tonight we'll be continuing on with our department budget presentations. We're going to be focusing on streets and sidewalks this evening. Mike Dellum and Michael Kosa will be presenting this. Give them just a minute to get set up. Ready to go.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm Mike Dallum, Public Works Director.
And I'm Michael Kosa, the city engineer.
And Jason was saying tonight we're going to go over the streets and sidewalk program. We'll start with the street operations. And, this fund is to maintain and continue for the maintenance and continued operation of the city streets and alleys, sidewalks, and other transportation related activities. Efforts include roadway repair, resurfacing treatment, street markings, inspection and repair of infrastructure, including signs, bridges, and signals. This fund also is responsible for maintaining fire hydrants, completing traffic studies, and responding to snow and ice occurrences. So our goals are to continue replacing plastic pavement markings every 7 years, a 7-year cycle for that, restriping lane lines annually, patching potholes as needed, and chip sealing roadways every 15 years. We'll also be studying ways to improve roadway signage and pedestrian safety. We'll investigate feasibility of red light and school speed zone cameras, and we'll coordinate the installation of wayfinding signs citywide. Our long-term goals are to improve pavement condition index of all roadways to 70 or greater. Again, we rate the roads and they could be 0 all the way up to 100. I think our average is about 75, 76 or so. So there are some roads we need to bring up to that 70 rating. Connect all traffic signals using intelligent transportation technology. Upgrade obsolete signals to current standards, such as we're doing at Main and Wood. And ADA compliance in all city roadway and sidewalk infrastructure. The council priorities that this meets is all transportation. Imagine that. So preserve existing assets, leverage technology to create efficiencies, invest in existing infrastructure to create capacity and efficiencies, and focus on alternative transportation methods. Key performance indicators are the continued condition index of roadways that we were talking about, 70 or greater, dollars used on preservation projects, and number of hydrants that we replace.
So I'll talk about our equipment and capital costs. We have a few one-time costs that we've identified and go through this, and we have a couple pictures coming up here, but these are all 25% of the total cost of these items. These items are all have a water, sewer, and storm component to them, so that we're sharing those costs over the different utilities. But this is the streets component, which is the only portion of those funds that come out of the general fund. The rest are out of utility rates. So we have the plate compactor, which is for asphalt compaction and subgrade compaction at $1,875. We have a radio system for flagging, $1,250. We have a skid steer replacement at $40,000, and then we have a tilt trailer for that new skid steer at $11,250. So a picture of our old plate compactor on the left. You can see it's seen better days and could be replaced. It's definitely reaching end of life. Talking about radios, coordinating traffic control during any sort of work that we're doing, whether it's utility work or streets work, is really important. And our radio system right now, we don't really have one. So it would be good to get a system in place, especially with about 12 radios, so that we could close and flag an intersection all simultaneously. And those kind of complex flagging situations, we want to be able to communicate what the plan is. So it's important. Also good for disaster preparedness and those sorts of things.
I have a question from Councilmember Brown.
Yes, what is the item number 3? The
The skid steer,
what's that?
that is a picture. That's that. It's kind of a multifunctional construction piece of equipment that you can hook a number of different attachments to it. You can grind asphalt with it. You can, push material with it. It's really kind of an all-purpose item for kind of roadway construction and roadway, the patching type work. It's basically, I call it, Caterpillar used to call it a Bobcat, if that helps, but it's, a small construction vehicle that can kind of, it can pick things up, it can scoop things, depending on what the attachment is on the front.
All right. And it can rip up asphalt.
Yep, we have a grinder attachment for it, so it can grind asphalt. So it can do a number of those kind of things. Somebody sits in the cab.
Thank you.
Yep. So that's what that item is there. And then the trailer that you see there, our current trailer that we use is not adequate for a new skid steer. So we'll be that's why we budgeted for a new one of those.
Deputy Mayor Hochstetter.
Are you taking questions right now, or you want us to wait?
I'm happy to take any questions at any time.
Okay, because what I'd like to know more about, just a short explanation on that road index rating thing you do, is I'm assuming 100 is great.
Brand new road.
Yeah. But can you tell me what you're judging?
Sure. There's a little manual that goes with rating the roads. So basically you go out and you count all the cracks, all the deformities, all the alligatoring, and then you score that road. And then, so what we do is we get together as a group and we all go rate the roads. And then we come back and say, okay, what did you come up with on the rating and what did you come up with? And if we're far off, we go out and re-rate and how'd you do this? So you're actually measuring and counting cracks. And there's a formula to come up with the condition of the road.
So, so like a pothole, does it rate really high?
Yeah.
And then it just goes into the combination of whether that road is good or bad. It doesn't mean you're gonna go out and fix that right then, or?
Not necessarily. You know, we want to have a rating of all the roads and then we kind of look at the worst first and try to fix those.
Okay, so that
But if
gives you
there's a
your
pothole,
priorities.
yeah.
That's where you work down
Yeah.
to do your priorities.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you.
So we do have a personnel item, an additional engineering technician. This was approved by council back in September, but this is really a new budget cycle item. Our current engineering staff technicians are not able to take on additional work due to their existing workload. We also have additional inspection needs to support the new sewer pretreatment program. Right now, we'll be looking at gearing a person up to do more fats, oils, and grease inspections for our sewer inspections. Businesses have to there's a number of businesses that have grease interceptors that collect that grease before it gets to our system, and we need to make sure that they're maintaining them and keeping our sewer system clean. Otherwise, it impacts our wastewater treatment plant. So that's part of one of the items for this additional inspector and engineering technician position.
We talked about it when we presented the sewer.
Deputy Mayor Hochstetter.
You still have your one person already? Didn't you have a gal that was doing that, the grease trap education and all that?
Well, she's doing more of managing the pre-treatment program. So she's doing a lot of prep for it and also working on interlocal agreements with Bonnie Lake and writing up the program that we have to do.
So this person would work under her, sort of,
Work with her, yeah.
doing different jobs?
They're different levels, yes. So she will help train inspectors to do these inspections. And so she'll probably be out there with them to start with until they are good at what they're doing. And also there's an education program. Again, most of it is education. Some people put in a grease trap and think, okay, we met the requirements, and 5 years down the road, all of a sudden we find all this grease in our sewers. And we go in there and say, hey, what are you doing? Oh, we got a grease trap. Have you ever looked at it? Well, no. So there's a lot of education that needs to go. And then through that, those inspections and the education, you know, one business might need to clean their grease trap every 6 months. And one might need to clean their grease traps once a week. So that helps them get educated on how often they do it. And then we've also bought a program. So when they do suck out the grease and do that, they can go onto this program and say, on this date, we did this
Oh, okay.
grease removal.
So this is an important part of keeping our sewers in good shape.
Right, right.
Okay. Right. Oh, Councilmember Stewart does have a question.
Are you almost done with your, this isn't one of my questions. Are you almost done with your presentation? Because I don't want to
No hurry, though.
interrupt you.
We can be done right now if you want.
We can go all night.
Come on. Don't give him a chance.
We have a couple, we have two more sections, but this is near the end of the first section.
Okay, well, this is items that you've already covered, I think. I just have a couple clarifying questions, and I should know the answer to a lot of these because they're more finance related. So Cassandra, get ready. Let's see. So Deputy Mayor talked about the new positions. So when they were funded the one new position that was automatically added to the budget and is just there, right? And then these new positions they want are a new allotment or new.
So as council approves the authorization of the new FTE, we're adding to our
Okay. So this is an increase of 1.5 FTE, is that what I'm hearing?
No, one FTE.
Just one, okay. And I really salute the staff in Public Works and Utilities for the good job they're doing, and they're really, really overworked. So I'm really happy that, I mean, I fully support that increase request. The item with a quick math here on my scratch pad on your just sheet here where it shows the budget overview, it looks like you got about a little more than a 30% increase in supplies from this biennium to the next one. Can you give a little explanation of that, please?
So as you probably well aware of, the cost of materials has gone way up.
Oh, sure.
So, we try to minimize the increases on our different supplies. But I mean, like salt has gone way up. So we're anticipating what the cost of that salt will be for the
Okay.
next biennium.
Yeah.
And so everything's going up and we're trying to budget for it.
Okay, thank you. And I didn't mean to be negative about that. And a question that goes along with the supplies. Do we buy enough salt and sand in anticipation of snowstorms, and how are you doing as far as budgeting that?
It's all part of this budget and we really try to be prepared for when the snow comes. Get the sand in advance because everybody will be running up there trying to get it at the same time. So we have it stockpiled. We have enough salt to make our brine so we can spray that on the road before the road freezes.
Excellent.
And we watch the weather very closely.
Yes, I know you do. You're tuned into the Weather Channel probably every night when you go to bed. The capital listing, and I understand the 25% breakdown for each of the district or the utilities. So am I to assume that those items, those cost items were included in their budget request? And so if it's one or nothing, right? I mean, if we grant one, we're granting them all. And then the executive branch didn't slice and dice these at all.
We're getting to that.
We're getting to that.
We definitely,
Yes.
we definitely sliced.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
And since you were talking about the executive branch slicing, go ahead, Michael.
There's a couple items that were in our streets operating budget that were trimmed. One was a replacement for our chipper. Our chipper was purchased in 1991. It's going strong, but there are parts that break down on a regular basis, and it's from 1991. Things are going to break. Parts are obsolete. They're hard to find. So we really are in need of a replacement. Additionally, we have a tractor from the 1980s. Nobody really knows exactly how old it is, but they know it was purchased before 1990. That's another item that we had as an ask to replace both those pieces of equipment. Chipper is at a 50% share because really it's more of a streets and storm item as opposed to you don't need to chip too many things in water and sewer. So we attributed that way. So it would hit the streets and storm budget only. The tractor replacements used, it would be a tractor that could be used by a number of different. There's needs in all four. So that's why that's spread across all four departments. But neither were. They were both sliced. So, but those are options for us to move forward with if that's something that council wanted to.
Mayor, if I could just add, I know to follow up on something that Councilmember Newman brought up. I think at our last budget meeting, Councilmember Stewart, you as well, about what is in our replacement model, what is not in our replacement model. We do have that list for you. We'll be presenting that with our fleet budget next week. So kind of all that rolling stock together. And for the record, these were not on the replacement schedule.
That does complete our operations portion. Any other questions?
Councilmember Newman.
Thank you. So you're asking for some of these costs, of the equipment in the recommended budget, it's 25% out of the general fund, and then the other 75% are what, from fees, dedicated funds, or where does the other 75% come from?
It would come from our 25% would come from our water fund, 25% from the sewer fund, 25% from the storm fund. So those would be utility charges that people pay into that system. They would come from those separate funds.
Okay, and with the chip sealing, do you do all of the chip sealing at once? When you say your goal is to do it every 15 years, do you do it all at once? Or is it a rolling 15
It's a
years?
cycle. Yeah, our goal is to get some done every year, or every other year, really. We want to have one project per biennium, essentially, that have the impact and also get the best costs for it, to get as much work done as we can at the same time. But then, really that budgeting wise, we're talking about trying to get about 15 years between chip seals for our roadways. So, does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, so they're all like sort of segmented on a cycle.
Yeah, we need to put a better map together, but we have a map.
Okay, okay.
that we can share.
And then how much does it cost to restripe lanes?
We restripe lanes annually, and it costs between $30,000 and $40,000 to do the entire city.
Okay, so not that significant.
But it's something we either contract with Pierce County, or we've also gone and hired a private contractor with Pierce County with unavailable.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Stewart.
So question for Jason, the difficult choices, that goes on the wish list for us? Is that where those go? The ones that you guys turned down?
Actually, these ones are not on the wish list. We have that list available. If council would like to see it. The next slide that Mr. Dolan's going to go over is on your wish list. So we caught a lot that council never sees, and then we took the things that the mayor and staff felt were worth a second look by council. And those are the ones that are on the wish list, including this next one. But I also know Councilmember Cole has a question.
Yeah.
Okay, and then Mike, I thought when we did the council strategic reserve for taxes, that money was put aside for increasing the rotation on street maintenance, chip sealing or repaving or something. How's that going?
We've increased it, but again, we're on a 15-year cycle for chip seal. So every 15 years, all our streets should see a chip seal.
Yeah,
recoating.
I heard you say that, but, and then what, has it always been 15 years or was it worse than that?
It
Because I
was
thought,
quite a bit more. It was more like 30 years at one point. And then as we got more money to put into it, we were able to
and
move
so
it down.
that's a favorable thing, what we did for you guys.
Yes,
Okay, thank
for
you.
everybody.
Councilmember Cole.
Yes, actually, I just have a clarifying question, I think. Jason, you said there is some list that you're putting together for next week that we can look at. And I'm asking to clarify that because, there's a lot of requests for equipment for this budget period. The chipper we just saw, the tractor we saw, the generator. And I know that we're seeing them over again because each fund is paying a specific amount of those costs. But I'm curious as to whether that list is all the equipment that's being proposed for this budget cycle, or was it something else?
So the list I was referring to was a list of all of our equipment that is not on a replacement schedule, that we're not collecting reserves for. So that's one list. The second two lists that you're alluding to are what we like to call the short list, or the other consideration list. Those are the items that the mayor and staff felt were the highest priority. And then the third list, which we have, but we weren't going to necessarily bring you the long list of every single executive branch cut, It does also have a number of pieces of equipment and things like the chipper, this tractor, and other equipment that you've seen that the executive branch cut is on that list. So we're happy to provide whatever council would like to see. We also just don't want to overwhelm you with asks.
Okay, yeah, I'd be interested in seeing just all of the big ticket equipment items that are being proposed and that are planned to be funded for this budget cycle.
Sure, we can do that.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Carry on.
All right, so under the other considerations is an overlay program. So this will be on one of the lists, the one for your consideration for whether or not to fund. An overlay program is something that I don't believe we've ever had. We have a chip seal program, which will take care of most of our local and residential type roadways and collectors, and even we chip sealed Main Street further to the east over by 160th a couple of years ago. But at some point, chip seal really isn't appropriate for, for example, Traffic Avenue. There's a lot more volume and it really needs to have a full overlay. And usually they remove 2 inches of asphalt using a grinding machine, patch any subgrade issues, make sure we don't have anything below that, and then come back over and add an overlay like you can see in the picture. Our overlay program right now is 0, and we're requesting $300,000 to start the concept of an overlay program. It's not going to get us very far, but it would be an item that we would want to carry over from biennium to biennium and try to amass enough funds to do a significant project. Give you an example. We did Sumner Taps Highway a couple, or was it 2 years ago now, and to do that road, it was a 2-inch overlay, and it cost around $800,000. We had federal funds to do that. We really go after federal funds all the time to get overlays done. It's really great. We have had great success at doing that, and we want to continue to have success with that. However, we know it's not always practical that every road qualifies for federal funds. And also there are just times when it's not a very competitive roadway for a grant award process. So that's why we are requesting funding for an overlay program so that we can set aside some funds to do this work where it needs to be done and serve our community.
Councilmember Potato.
Out of the 24th Street interchange, didn't you use concrete out there for some of those roads? And would that be a good option for Traffic Avenue with the high volume of trucks that come in and out?
So that was a really great project that we were able to do, to add some concrete roadway out at 136th and 24th is what you're referring to.
Yeah.
That kind of right there. The really great benefit there was we had some major grants. We had a National Highway Freight Program grant. We had about $5.5 million between 2 grants that we had been awarded for that whole area. And with those additional funds, we were able to do more. We were able to use some of those funds to make that a concrete intersection and really make it a lot easier to maintain in the future. Right. So there's a high cost to doing that. A simple overlay, you're just working on like 2 inches of asphalt, but there might be 8 or 10 inches of asphalt that you'd have to remove to put in a new concrete road base. So, it's kind of like putting a new roof on your house versus, pulling off the old roof and pulling off the plywood and, going all the way down and rebuilding from the bottom. And changing a type. So it's great to get some concrete in. I love it. And I love it to be able to not have to worry about a roadway for a long time. Right. But and it's really great for trucks too, because they just take a toll on the roads.
Yeah,
but
that's what I see, because the high volume that come in.
But this would be great just to be able to do an overlay here or there when we really need to be able to address some roadway rutting issues, or if we're really losing a chunk of the roadway, this would be a great thing to do. We do have funds to do an overlay on Valley, between Highway 410 and up to about Mead McCumber. So we have funds to do that through a grant award that will, I think it comes in 25 or 26. But, ways that we can do more of it and do roads that might not be awarded funding otherwise. This would be a great program for that.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
All right.
Ready to go to street capital?
I think so.
Right, so for Streets Capital, our highlights are advancing roadway projects to improve Sumner's arterial corridors, which are the main streets through town. Promoting improvements to the state highways to keep our cut-through traffic out of residential areas. And a lot of our recent work here, we completed construction of the SR 410 Traffic Avenue Interchange project with the new bridge. We began construction, or we will be beginning construction of the Town Center Main and Wood intersection, which we're about to put out to add. Should be doing that in the next week or two. We began construction of the Town Center Utility and Woonerf project. It's underway. We designed the Stewart Road Bridge replacement. We're at 90% right now and moving toward 100% design for that project. And we're in permitting right now. Permitting and right-of-way acquisition for that. We advanced design for the 166 widening and intersections improvements. That's the two roundabouts down 410 and Sumner Taps Highway. And then we've completed design for, we're about to complete design for the Maple Street Pedestrian Improvements Project, which is a new pedestrian signal at Maple and Traffic Avenue. Our 23 and 24 goals coming up here. We want to begin construction of the Stewart Road Bridge replacement. We want to complete construction of the Town Center Main and Wood project. We want to advance the design and permitting on 166 and getting that property secured as well at the intersection there. We're completing construction of the Town Center Utilities and Woonerf project. We'll be constructing another utility project at Cherry and at Maple and that's primarily a water replacement project, but also has a roadway component clearly. That's kind of a companion to the work that we're doing with the other water line replacements that are going on right now. We'll be constructing the grant-funded Maple Street Pedestrian Improvements Project I talked about, and then finishing design and seeking construction funding for our alley activation, which we have some designs funds for currently adjacent. That's the alley adjacent to Heritage Park.
All right, Deputy Mayor Hochstetter.
Michael, can you give me a landmark on where this Maple Street Pedestrian Improvement Project is? Because I'm not on your committee anymore, so I haven't seen a picture or anything.
So it's there's a pedestrian signal that will be at the intersection of Traffic Avenue and Maple Street. So, right down this road here, at the end when it intersects.
Is it where
traffic-
people cross to go to Sunset Chevrolet?
Yes, that's it's an existing rectangular flashing beacon sign. The one
Yeah,
that blinks
But
back
it's
and
still
forth.
a dangerous
And yes,
crossing.
and it's like a 5-lane roadway, and really at that point, the flashing beacons are better than nothing, but they're not really the appropriate treatment for for the amount of semis coming down that road.
Yeah, so what are you gonna do?
So we're looking at putting in a red, yellow, green signal that is an overhead mast arm signal.
Oh, a light. You're
Yes.
talking, you have a light that will stop traffic
Yes.
so people can walk
Mhm.
and not run.
Yep.
Like the-
It's-
For your life.
It's actually, it might not be red, yellow, green. It's actually a modified where it kind of might blink yellow all the time. And then if somebody does push the button, it will turn red.
Okay,
So then you'll have, and it will be connected to the adjacent signals as well, so that they'll all be attached to each other and programmed at the same time to be smart. So
Yeah.
they don't turn the wrong color at the wrong time, and stop and create gridlock. But
okay.
to get people across that more efficiently and definitely vehicles understand a red light
Mhm.
much more than, some blinking lights on the side of the road. Makes a big
Okay.
difference.
Yeah, very worthwhile. Thank you.
It is completely grant funded by a federal grant through WashDOT. So
Better yet. Okay, Councilmember Potato.
So many people ask about the 166th, and it's good to hear about the design and that you're moving forward. When do you expect construction to begin?
that's a great question and a challenging question. So the quick answer is we're probably talking 25 to 26 right now.
Okay.
Before we could really be, close or having another conversation of whether or not we're ready. There's also a funding gap, a very large funding gap. We don't have the funds for construction right now. However, we are moving that direction. We have federal funds in the project for the design. We're acquiring the property, some of the property that we need right now. And then working with, I had a meeting with Department of Fish and Wildlife today. That went well about the box culvert that we're going to have to be constructing there as well for the fish passage underneath that intersection. That Salmon Creek runs diagonally underneath there. So the quick answer is maybe 2026, but it's going to be a while to get through the environmental permitting. We also have a remediation site that we're talking about. That is an old gas station there.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of challenges to that project, but it's going to be a great one once we get through them all.
And are you still expecting the state to, is it going to be like the 410 Traffic Avenue interchange where Sumner takes the lead and then the state says, oh, that's a good idea as long as you do all the hard work? But do you think the
Yes.
state is going to, help out or
We've been-
identify it?
We've been working with the state, and we do have some funds that moved over to that project that were moved over by the legislature. So I think we have about $500,000 of state funds that were appropriated. Outside of that, they are helping us work through their permitting process, and so it's going to be a slow process. But yeah, the Sumner is taking the lead on it. It's really not a priority for them.
Yeah.
It's a priority for us because it affects our community more so than, they were looking at how does it affect their mainline roadways. And this is just like the very far end of their system, essentially.
Okay, well, thanks for all your work.
I'll just add that, this has obviously been one of our legislative priorities for the last couple sessions. I would expect that council will probably want to make it a priority again in the upcoming session. We've also had numerous conversations with our regional partners, including the county and even our private partners like Tahale, to help us lobby to fix this in conjunction also with improvements on the Ording Highway. So definitely in the forefront of our mind.
So moving on to long-term goals for the streets capital fund. Continuing to update and use our 6-year transportation improvement program to invest in our arterial streets, and then identifying programs and securing grants to help defray the costs of these needed improvements.
And where this meets council priorities, effective transportation, and then in excellent government, fiscally balanced mix of desired services, and leveraging partnerships for enhanced services. Our key performance indicators are project completion, number and value of projects, and then grant funding received. That completes our street capital. Any other questions?
Any other questions? I think you're good.
So we'll move on to sidewalk construction fund. So for over 100 years, it has remained Sumner's goal to be a walkable community with a safe and complete sidewalk system for pedestrians. Sidewalk construction benefits everybody for transportation, access, and health. In the recent work we completed improvements funded by $1.2 million of Sound Transit Station Access Grant. We've replaced over 1,000 linear feet of sidewalk in River Grove with complete streets funds. And we implemented a new street tree and sidewalk municipal code. And we're completing the sidewalk gap between Main Street and the YMCA. Sidewalk, our goals to seek grant funding to construct new or replace deteriorated sidewalk, continue the 50% match voluntary sidewalk program, implement a yearly street tree sidewalk damage repair program, complete the construction Academy Street Bike Lane project, complete the design of SR 410 River Road Pedestrian Bridge project, and implement policy for sidewalk repair and replacement. Long-term goals are provide ADA compliant sidewalks on all city streets and continue to make Sumner a walkable community. And the council priorities this meets under transportation, investing in existing infrastructure to create capacity and efficiencies, focused on alternative transportation methods and for excellent government, equitable distribution of resources, and fiscally balanced mix of desired services.
All right, so talking about equipment and capital costs. Talk about this in the next slide as well, but our new request was for a street tree sidewalk and damage replacement program. So looking at sidewalks that are specifically damaged by street trees, which are, I'll talk about in a minute. And then the other item was our volunteer sidewalk program and looking at actually taking funds, lowering the funds there and using it more for this damage replacement program. Next slide. So to talk a little bit about that, we had a code discussion and a code update regarding sidewalks a little over a year ago, I think, and discussed our what we want to do and who's responsible for what. And really, the goal, the information that came out of that is that the city is going to take responsibility for street tree damaged sidewalks and any utilities that have damaged sidewalks, but then homeowners are responsible for anything that doesn't fall into those categories. So you can see, for example, that sidewalk there in the picture doesn't have a tree next to it, and really is just kind of falling apart. Not necessarily the city's responsibility, because that's really a homeowner's responsibility at that point. So we wanted to rebrand our existing volunteer sidewalk program to the Helping Homeowners Sidewalk Repair Program. And really, we talked about reducing the funds appropriated to that. And the reasoning for that is, we know that people are interested in getting sidewalks repaired and replaced. Really, we also have folks and properties that have sidewalks where we've had complaints about their sidewalks. And a lot of times we'll get complaints, but then we find out, well, it's really a homeowner's responsibility to do something about that based on the code decisions that were decided. So we're wanting to change this program into one that is there as a complaint-driven program. We get a complaint, we go out, we rate a sidewalk and say, hey, that sidewalk is not compliant with ADA. We would be sending a letter to a homeowner at that point saying your sidewalk isn't compliant, you need to do something about it. Well, we would continuing to have a program where we can say the city will help with 50% of the cost and with some of the design work is really a benefit, because it's really hard for a homeowner, depending on what their financial situation is. They're not ones to necessarily know how to hire contractors. I, as a homeowner, wouldn't know who to start with necessarily, but we would like to still help along the process and still get their sidewalk fixed. So we're looking at changing it into a program that's specific to, that's complaint driven, and that will help solve those complaint issues. That's what we're calling, that's why we decided to rename that. We think based on the backlog we have right now, that $50,000 for the biennium would be sufficient to do so. So that's why we propose that. In addition to that, we wanted to say, well, we do know of a lot of street trees that are damaging sidewalks. And we did a citywide inventory of that. We used some of our interns to inform that. And then we took the information they provided and created and put a programmatic budget together for that. Said, how much is it going to cost to replace all of that? And we came up with an approximate number of $2.5 million to do all of the repair work in the city. We said, that sounds like a lot of money. And we said, how about we look at doing that over a cycle? And how quickly would we like to address those problems? So we proposed a 10-year cycle or to do a lot of those repairs and get through all of that work. We also don't know if our programmatic numbers are perfectly accurate right now. We haven't really done a program sidewalk project where we've done kind of onesie twosie panels. You know, it would be a program where we would just do, 3 panels of sidewalk here by this street tree that's failing. We would have to move around a lot, I guess is what I'm saying. And we haven't really done that. We've usually done larger stretches of sidewalk. So essentially that's what we're looking to create is a program and do it over a period of time. Right now we were proposing a 10-year period, and that would cost $500,000 over a biennium for 5 bienniums. That was what we originally proposed. And then we also have the ADA sidewalk improvements program. That's a very narrow program that repairs really immediate needs for folks that are in immediate need of a problem, whether it's they became in a wheelchair bound or they're in a wheelchair or something along those lines, and it needs to be fixed right now. And like I said, very narrow scope for that. But that as a program where we receive complaints directly through our ADA compliance. So those are our 3 elements of our sidewalk program.
Deputy Mayor Hochstetter.
I like all the improvements that you're making and how well you've thought through this program. But what I was wondering about is on the complaint driven part, can it also be a complaint from the homeowner that they could begin and be part of the program? Or is it just pedestrians that, people who walk on your street?
I think the most numbers of complaints we received are actually from homeowners that's on their own sidewalks. A lot of times though, it's when are you going to fix this? It's like, well, actually it's not the city's responsibility to fix it. It's going to be your own. And that's a really hard conversation to have with folks. So yes, it does happen that way. And, if we go out and raid a sidewalk, then technically it is out of compliance. We have to do something. We can't just kind of ignore it. So we do have that conversation with homeowners, and this program would help us kind of route them to a place where we can get the work done and try to share the cost.
But you're going to help them through the process. I mean, you mentioned design because you don't want them
Right.
designing and taking their wheelbarrow out there and all that. So you will begin the process and get the whole thing going for them.
That would be the goal. And, a homeowner can do work on their own property, but they would need to hire a licensed contractor to do that. So you can't get a wheelbarrow yourself, but if they said, I'm going to just fix it tomorrow, they would have to apply for a permit first, but they could apply for a permit to do the sidewalk work themselves, pay for it all up front with their own money, and that is a possibility. They could go through our permitting process. I don't think that's happened really.
So to work on the sidewalk in front of your house, even if it's just a tripping hazard, where someone fills in, you have to, do they know they have to get a permit?
I would hope so. It's technically not on their property, so it is in city right of way, and they would need a licensed contractor to do that work.
Okay.
You need a permit anytime you do work in the right of way.
Work in the right of way. That's what triggers that.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you. Nice job on the presentation. I like the work that you've done as well on the sidewalks, but that picture really bothers me. Because I've walked on that sidewalk with a question mark. When it's dark out, that is I mean, I was taking my life in my hands, so I started riding a bus. Well, then they took the bus away. Can you, I think I probably know the answer to this, but can you help me understand on that one where there's a little chain link fence? Is that the property owner's responsibility? Because there's a little grass on the street side? How do you decide which is property owner's responsibility and which is the city's responsibility?
So property owners are responsible for sidewalks that are adjacent to their property.
No matter how close it is to the road?
Correct. You are responsible for the sidewalk, the landscaping strip, and I can't remember if it's a curb and gutter or not. Basically, your responsibility ends at the curb and gutter. But the responsibility to complete the sidewalk or to make sure that the sidewalk is in a good state of repair. Anything adjacent, along your frontage is your responsibility.
Okay.
However,
I kind of understood that.
okay. However,
Thank you for clarifying.
street trees, when we acknowledge that we own the street trees, and if those street trees damage the sidewalk, then it becomes a city
Then that's-
responsibility to fix the damage created by street trees.
Like that other picture that's covered up by
Yep.
the people that are at home.
Yeah, that sidewalk's been repaired, actually.
Yeah, I know. That was really horrible
Yeah, yeah, it
for
was.
years.
But we've replaced it, and that is actually an interesting product that it's a flexible pavement. So
Oh.
instead of removing a very large tree, we were looking at ways to try to save larger trees. So and not cut roots as significantly as we would need to if we put in a regular sidewalk. But that one, it's kind of like a rubber tire kind of
Interesting.
feel as you're walking through it, and but it will be able to flex with the tree. We're seeing if it's going to work and how efficient it is and how quickly it's going to get ripped up. But it won't be ripped up like concrete. It'll be able to flex with those roots as they kind of adjust it, and it won't be an immediate that sidewalk popped and now we have a tripping hazard. Our hope is that it will
Okay,
be able
so
to move with it.
thank you. And I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. I could talk all night, like I said.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Two other situations. Why does the city let them get away with that? That has been like that for 20 years that I've lived where I live. Why don't we do something about that?
I think we've, now that we've clarified the code in the last year or so, and, we also know there's a lot of problems with sidewalks. And I talked about us looking at a complaint-driven system for now, because I think that's really the right approach. Otherwise, you stir up a lot of folks really quickly. And I don't think we're ready to have that conversation with the number of people that would have to address it with. So I think we're looking at places where we do have specific complaints and how we need to take action. It's a little more reactive, but it's probably the right size of projects that we would need in order to move things forward. And it allows us to use those funds to take care of the problems that we have claimed responsibility for. And that's really important. I think that's really important to address the ones that the city essentially says we're responsible for. If we have somebody trip and we have it's a potential liability to us.
That is huge. I realize there's probably not a lot of people that walk, but it's just on their way to Siebenthaler Park, which will be a show place, and people will walk on this street. And if somebody trips and breaks their leg or their ankle or something, it's going to be a problem. Okay, I don't want to lecture you. I'm sorry I'm doing that.
No problem.
The other sidewalk that I've noticed a lot because I've been walking on it a lot with my wife, and that's the one that goes down Puyallup Avenue towards the river, towards White River.
Okay.
There's street trees because they're on the street side of the sidewalk, so there are trees, right?
Yeah,
It's right across the street from the McDonald's Bun Bakery.
talking about, yes. And
There's
kind of in
so
the
many
curve.
places where they've put somebody has put asphalt on the sidewalk. Is that the city's done that to repair that?
I believe that was the city's work. Yes.
Because it's like a hoop-de-doo when you ride your bike over that.
But
So that's a prime example of the street tree damage.
Yes.
And that's why we're asking for the dollar amount we are, because that's our responsibility. So we'd hire a contract to go and repair all of that.
Okay.
it's one
Okay.
of our, it's that specific spot is one of our probably highest, if not the first out of the gate type of projects that we'd want to solve because it is terrible. And we don't have funding for it at the moment. So that's why
Yeah.
we're asking for the funds.
You're rubbing that in a little bit.
All right.
Not
Thank you.
rubbing it in. We want to be,
I'll be
I'm trying to
trying.
be
Thank-
aggressive.
Councilmember Cole.
Yes, I think these are all three are great programs and it sounds pretty exciting. I have a question in particular about the street tree sidewalk repair program. So if a homeowner plants a tree, does that still mean that the city will take responsibility for anything that happens to the sidewalk, any repairs required?
Well, a homeowner needs to get a permit, actually, whether they realize it or not, to put a street tree in. And we also have a standard detail where there's a root barrier. So hopefully, if they're installed correctly with the root barrier, then they won't start heaving the sidewalks. And if a homeowner wanted a tree, they could request it, and Parks would actually install one.
Okay. But if for some reason they didn't get a permit to do that, didn't request that Parks put it in there and they did it themselves, then I would assume that they would be responsible for repairing that sidewalk if there was a need.
Yeah, they would be responsible. We do have a database so that we know all the trees that are out there. And I'm sure on that database, if a tree showed up and our parks guys saw it, they put it on that list. The homeowner put it in.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you.
Councilmember Newman.
Thank you. I'm wondering, so on the budget page, so under the volunteer sidewalk program, the numbers over the last, 4-5 years vary quite a bit. Can you explain to me or remind me? I think one year, I don't remember if it was underused or the program, but can you explain to me the broad swings in funding? Where it's like, so 2019 is 202,000, but then 2020 is 45.
A lot of that depends on the kind of the pace of the projects that we put out. Sometimes we'll have we put out larger programs and sometimes we put out smaller programs.
So was that because of what we budgeted, or is that because of interest level from participants?
We haven't always funded that we haven't always had like a yearly call for projects, for example. So we'll put out a call for volunteer projects we have in the past. And when that's happened, they don't always get done in that same calendar year. The projects aren't annual projects, so they'll be more likely be a biennial project, and that's why there's the differentiation. So in 2019, we would have had a volunteer sidewalk program, but then in 2020, we might have done some smaller work, but not as significant we didn't have a separate call for it. We might have.
So
done some
we
extra-
didn't put notice, we didn't go looking for people who want it.
Right, it's not an annual call for new projects. We might have actually, that might have even just been like a project that spilled over from 2019 into 2020. I'm not sure. I have to go back and look, but typically our projects are not like an annual, like we haven't been doing them annually. We've been doing them more biennially to try to get better pricing.
And so then for the 320,000, do we expect that to be fully used? No, I'm going to 2021, 2022.
Yeah, I think we brought that to council and we redirected those funds to not have the voluntary sidewalk program, but it helped with the River Grove area and the complete streets. So that we use the voluntary money for that.
Okay, and then I'm assuming there was some kind of assessment as we move through the tree replacement. sidewalks, that there was some kind of assessment. Do we know, like, percentage-wise, proportionally, how much of our sidewalk area is actually caused, like the damage caused by trees versus what we think are property owners?
I know our analysis is focused on trees. I don't know if I can have a comparison between tree versus non-tree damage. Part of that reasoning is we didn't want to find a bunch of non-tree damage and then have to cite a bunch of people. So we really said, all right, let's just focus on the tree damage that we have. Let's look at each street tree and see if we've got problems that we need to resolve each one of those. And so that was the focus of our inventory, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you. I guess, just in terms of what I think is important, but I don't know the scale of the problem. So, and I hate suggesting things or say, oh, this is the route I'd like to go without knowing the scale of what it is I'm brainstorming about. But rather than actually keep decreasing this fund, I'm actually inclined, given that we do have serious sidewalk issues, and I think most homeowners, and especially now with inflation and whatnot, are not prepared to do it. I would actually like to see us continue to increase this and cover more than 50%. Like, depending on what, and again, I don't know the ramifications of what I'm suggesting now. So, I don't know how much it costs. I don't have a scale, like how much sidewalk, like what is the cost to a homeowner, like for like a typical homeowner in Sumner for replacing that sidewalk? When you start with permitting, contracting, materials, and what is a range of cost does that end up being?
We've done a little bit of that. I didn't have that prepared for right at the moment. I can get you that information more accurately later, but it is probably in the like I would say $50 to $70 linear foot range. So if you got a 50-foot wide frontage, you're looking at 50 times, you're looking at that 20, talk myself into a corner.
So if it's 100-foot,
100-foot, thank you.
that's easier math.
Easier math.
So
frontage would be
$4,000,
yeah,
$5,000.
$5,000 to $7,000.
I feel like in a lot of cases, that's easier for us to do than it is for a homeowner to do, given the other expenses they have. And like, rather than, well, this is yours, not mine, why don't we just fix sidewalks? It is kind of.
We might want to look at the code and talk to legal, but it is in the code right now that it's the homeowner's responsibility.
Well, we may have to change that too if we go down the road that
and,
I'd like to pursue.
if we went out and fixed everybody's sidewalks for them, then that's really a gift of public funds.
Well, if we change the code, there's ways, but it becomes very expensive. I'll tell you that.
When it can be
giving
completely
you
different, or prioritization. I'm not talking about a promise. I'm not talking about a promise of doing it, but a prioritization in terms of main.
we would have an issue with, taking over responsibility, because there is a liability aspect to that as well. We did actually quite a look around our region to see what others are doing, and couldn't actually find anyone else who had taken responsibility for all of their city sidewalks. So
I believe that. I think I'm more thinking about in the same way that we can do 50%. I'm talking about more like a grant type process, like where they apply or something, but the possibility of up to 100 instead of up to 50.
So
Jason, go ahead.
can I jump in here and give a little history? One of the challenges we had with the voluntary sidewalk program before was it's not as simple of this dollar amount for this linear foot, because when you start doing the design work, inevitably there's a sidewalk cut that you need to have at a certain angle for ADA, and then there requires some professional engineering for the storm runoff. So that was always a challenge, in that we would set up a 50-50 program with a homeowner, but it was more like a 70 or 80% share of the city. It was never 50-50. It was always us paying the majority of it, which might be appropriate, right? That's a council decision. But one of the reasons why you saw a significant decrease over the last couple of years is because It took us about a year to work with a consultant to do a big study on sidewalk repair programs. And one of the things we looked at was, is the volunteer sidewalk program even a good thing to have? And if so, what are the changes we can make to make it more effective? And one of the things that, you know, Michael alluded to, but didn't go into a lot of detail on, is on the new program, it will allow us to actually budget for the appropriate 50-50. You know, we have some money set aside in this biennium, but as more sidewalks are identified and we enter into a voluntary correction agreement with the property owner, that allows us to actually then budget for it in the next budget year or budget biennium to make sure that we are more equitably sharing that cost with the homeowner. Second, on the street tree repair program, there is, I don't even remember how many, but we can provide you with the exact number of street tree damaged sections of sidewalks. It's an incredible amount, and it's actually overwhelming. And one of the things that we worked with our program design was, you know, we've done a lot of great sidewalk work in certain parts of town and not as much in other parts of town. And that is something that we are going to prioritize by looking at the worst damage, because they are all rated on a scale, address the worst ones first. And when you start getting down to where, you know, you tie, we're going to be looking at it for what are the neighborhoods that we have not done sidewalk work in, right? And let's get to those areas first, because honestly, they have missing sections, there's street tree damage, a lot of other things that go into consideration that, you know, this part of the city has benefited greatly from the sound transit money. I know it's not exactly a full answer, but it maybe gives some context to where
No, it
how we got
helps.
here
I
today.
would love to see that assessment that we did with the city trees.
And
Thanks.
what we found with the voluntary program, the people that could afford it would sign up for it. And we'd have damage in other neighborhoods, but they couldn't afford to do the 50-50. So they wouldn't even sign up. for
That's
it.
part of my concern. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Patel.
So in the last few years, wasn't there a program of access to schools? You know, was there a sidewalk program for that?
Safe routes to schools, yes.
So today I was walking on the north side of Washington Street, and I think it's Bonnie. Well, it said Plum, you know, and the real sign wasn't there. So I think it's Bonnie Avenue and Washington. You know, there was a sidewalk all the way, and then at that corner,
With
you know,
big
there's
trees.
nothing. And then I just wondering, because of so many people park, you know, in the city streets, that when they need ADA access, you know, because it was just grass and then there was a tree, so they probably need to take the tree out. So I was just curious if that school program isn't running anymore.
It's still running. Of course, we apply for it. You know, we've been fortunate that we did receive that grant quite a few years ago, repeatedly.
Mhm.
And then as you move out, then there's less chance of securing that. They're looking at other places that have a tougher time getting to the schools. Also, there's a TIB program, sidewalk program, and we continually put that in. One of the areas is Mead and McCumber between Valley and Wood. So we've been trying to get money to put in sidewalk there. If the location I think you're talking about is, I think we did get safe routes to school money for that area. But that tree and the people's property
Yeah.
made it really too tough for us to get the sidewalk through there.
Okay.
And they weren't interested in removing that tree.
Yeah, because it is quite a big tree. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So this one here.
There you go. So we just talked about that slide.
So our key performance indicators, linear feet of sidewalk added. We'll look at that. Linear feet of sidewalk repaired or replaced, and number of non-compliant curb ramps replaced.
Okay,
That's what I was looking for.
gotcha. So after all that talk, we were saying, looking at about $500,000 for a sidewalk program that was, getting, that was on completing all of the sidewalk repairs we had programmed over a 10-year cycle. When we went, we got trimmed to $200,000 for that. So I think that would be a really good start toward getting our sidewalks repaired. But that's I guess the remainder would be the difference between what we proposed and the current program under that was decided upon. So.
As Michael was alluding to on the short list that you'll see coming back to you is that $300,000 balance that was cut by the executive department. All right, coming up, October 17th, you have your regular council meeting, and then we'll move into a special study session to go over some of our internal service funds, including fleet operations and maintenance, fleet replacement, and information technology. That concludes our budget presentation. Happy to answer any other questions.
Okay, Councilman, Deputy Mayor Hochstetter.
So those numbers are for 2 years, right? So we
Correct.
would have, that 200,000 would be 100,000 per year. Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
Think we're
Thank you
good?
very much.
Thank you.
Oh. Here we got one from Mr. Stewart here real quick. Sorry.
Yeah,
They
and this is
almost
more
got
for
out.
Jason, I think. The KPI lists, who keeps track of those? Is each department give you a report on a regular basis then? I mean, I'd be interested for us to look back, or at least for me, to look backwards a couple bienniums to see how they're doing. Is that reasonable to ask for that, or is that, I don't want to do a lot of.
No, you're
Hard
actually
work on
leading into where you're going to start seeing us report on those data points in the next year. So you're going to, the idea is at the mid-buy, every department will come through and go through each one of their budgets and go through those data metrics, and where possible, we will pull historical data in. It's not possible for all of them, unfortunately.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, guys. All right,
Okay, I'll just take a moment for CFO Raymond to come up and get her presentation going.
yep. Okay. None of that. You're gonna crunch in my ear.
We don't need a shot of adrenaline now.
You think this is why? Should we wait for Councilmember Newman to come back?
We can. Cassandra's still working on pulling up her presentation, so we'll
Okay.
just take just a moment anyway.
I had a car like that. I had a truck like that. And my parents had a car like that.
Oh, really? In that old picture?
Mhm.
Wow. So is our
Okay.
budget one in here?
Budget
Right
one?
after the picture of the car.
No, I don't think so. She'll have it for us.
Okay.
All right, now we will move on to resolution number 1640, tax year 2023 ad valorem property tax. Cassandra Raymond. carry it away.
Thank you very much. Good evening. It is that time of year again to discuss our property tax levy. This is the setting of the ad valorem property tax levy rate for tax year 2023. This process starts every year. We do this annually. We start in September. In September, we receive our preliminary certification of assessed values from Pierce County. It's the 2022 values for the tax year 2023. From that information, we put together information, we review, we look at just a variety of factors, and we bring the information to the Finance and Personnel Committee for discussion. We have had that discussion. We have discussed both the mayor and the staff recommendation and received Finance and Personnel Committee's recommendation. So we're before you here tonight to kind of talk about that levy recommendation, our next steps. So we have this evening, we are scheduled for a public hearing on October the 17th. So that's next Monday. And then with the resolution before council for action on November the 7th. We're required to certify our levy request to Pierce County no later than November the 30th. So that's the timeline of where we are at. I apologize, I have a little bit of a lag here. There we go. So property taxes, just a little information. This is our most stable revenue source into the general fund. Property taxes, for all intents and purposes, are 100% collectible. So generally what we levy is what we get. This is about 21% of our general fund revenue. Primarily property taxes go into the general fund. The one difference we see is we do see $165,000 a year that goes into our street capital fund. That was a council direction beginning some years back that continues through tax year 2022. And then council will need to make a determination whether or not to continue that going forward. That intent in that street capital fund was to use those funds to leverage for grants. As you saw from the prior presentation, we've been very successful in doing that. And that's working exactly as we intended. Again, we brought this to Finance and Personnel Committee on October the 5th. We have our public hearing scheduled. That's required by statute, as well as giving our citizens an opportunity to have input into the property tax levy with our resolution scheduled and then passed and certified to Pierce County. Where we start really is with the statute. RCW authorizes any taxing district with a population of 10,000 or more to increase its levy up to 1% from the highest lawful levy since 1985. No idea why they picked 1985. And if you see in your packet, I did include a copy of Pierce County's preliminary certification they provided to us. It is a whole lot of numbers, which really gives us the foundation for our calculations. Pierce County also provides us an example of what the resolution would be if we were to request our highest lawful levy. So I included a snippet of that here. You'll see that this gives us our levy amount from the prior year. So this was tax year 2022 of 4.258 million. We are over 10,000. And then it gives us what our levy would be, both the additional dollar amount as well as the percentage lift if we were to levy the full amount. And that's important to keep in mind. I will say the population is a matter of note in some years. It's not in this year. A city with a population of 10,000 or over would need to certify, to pass a resolution certifying the need for a 1% if the IPD, which is a measure of inflation, was under 1%. We are nowhere near that. I mean, at this point, CPI, our June number was 10.1 and IPD is following right along with that. It's currently over 9%. Generally, what we've done is not assessed our entire levy amount. We've been banking capacity. We've been banking capacity since we annexed to the fire district. The difference between the requested levy and the maximum levy amount is termed banked capacity. It's a little bit of a misnomer. It's not an emergency reserve. We're not actually depositing anything into a bank. These amounts don't carry over. They're recalculated annually as part of Pierce County certification. And really all it is a mathematical difference. It's the difference between what we could collect and what we're asking to collect. When we look at our property tax distribution, we get about 8% of the overall tax assessment. The remaining is made up by a variety of different taxing jurisdictions, and that's anything from fire and EMS to the school, the state, the transit authority, conservation futures. The ones that we see here in red are all ones that have been voter approved. And you can see up about the 1 o'clock position, the city of Sumner. It gets about 8% of that total tax distribution. This was the distribution for tax year 2022. We actually won't have the distribution for tax year 23 until everyone has certified their levies, and then we'll get that information from Pierce County, usually in the first quarter of the tax year. Some of the other base information that Pierce County gives us that we use to calculate is our assessed valuation. The dollar amount levied is calculated by the assessed valuation divided by 1,000 multiplied by the levy rate. So it's, I hate to say it, but it's using algebra in the real world, which I swear I would never do. So when we look at our assessed valuation, seriously, for tax year 2022, we had a little over $4.28 billion in assessed valuation. Tax year 2023, that will rise to 4.97 billion. So that's about a 16% increase in our assessed valuation overall. We did run some numbers today, and our MIC picks up about 56% of that assessed valuation, which is great. That's a big increase from when the MIC was first delineated. Is that the right word? On the single family residence, because this is really what our bread and butter is. We look at the assessed valuation change. These numbers are provided by Pierce County. They give us what their average assessed valuation is for a single family residence, and those are the values that we use. So we have for tax year 2022, 441,000, tax year 2023 at a little over 514,000. And it follows right along with the overall assessed valuation increase in Sumner, about a 16% lift. There were a lot of considerations when we were putting together kind of the various options for what our levy could look like in 2023. The economy, there's still a lot of uncertainty revolving around the economy, where it's going. Are we going to have a recession? Are we already in a recession? How long could a recession last? How deep is it going to go? Inflation continues to be greater than 9%. We're a slice of that property tax pie. So we always want to look at what are some future tax actions of our neighbors. We're looking at the library system, the fire district, the school district, what's kind of in that pipeline. We want to be just cognizant and thoughtful of that. But we also have to look at our unmet budget needs. You've been seeing throughout these presentations that there are a whole lot of unmet needs that frankly all have value. As we were going through the budget requests, there really wasn't anything on that list that you just looked at and went, really? No. Everything had value, everything was important, and everything was significant, as well as the opportunity cost. By calculating a levy less of what we have the opportunity for, what are we losing in opportunity as far as things that we could be accomplishing here in the community? So we looked at a variety of different factors. We looked at what it would be if we just took a 1% increase over last year's collections. What would it be? What would it look like if we assessed the full amount that we were allowed to by law? We ran those numbers. It's for tax year 2023, we looked at what the increase would be, the increase over tax year 2022. And then we added in the additional revenue from new construction and improvements. This is a number that's provided to us by Pierce County. Pierce County calculates what's the assessed valuation of the new construction and improvements that have come online since the last time we levied a property tax. And they give us that figure to re-levy, to add to our property tax rolls, as well as a little bit of additional revenue from administrative refunds. Really what that is if Pierce County has a property that comes off the rolls for any reason, whether it changed classification, maybe now it's not taxable, maybe for some reason, the property was compromised and it's coming off the rolls, they allow us to re-levy that dollar amount. That would give us a total tax year 2023 levy, looking at the levy rate per thousand. And then we essentially apply that to what Pierce County is providing for a single family residential assessed valuation. We see that if we did a 1% increase, we would have an additional 42,000 to the general fund. It'd be about $1.96 extra per month. If we assess the amount that we're allowed to, we would see an additional $403,000 into the general fund. It's an additional $5.07 per month for our average single family resident. And then we looked at, okay, what's the difference between the full levy and the 1%? What differential are we looking at? It's an increase to the general fund of $360,000. And then from 1% to a full levy, the average annual increase for the homeowner is $37.31. And going from 1% to the full levy, we would see an average impact to the homeowner of $3.11. And taking all of this information into account, this mayor's and staff recommendation was to levy the full amount. We had a robust conversation at the Finance Personnel Committee and concurred with that recommendation. It's not something that is enjoyable. We never like increasing a tax, but in this case, increasing to the full amount, that 9.5% lift, really doesn't even keep pace with inflation. And when we look at the number of unmet needs and for the most part, minimal impact of a little over $3.11 a month, we feel that the value to the community is worth taking that step. So those are the numbers that we prepared. Again, we've got a tonight's study session, a public hearing on the 17th, action on November 7th, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Cassandra? Councilmember Brown.
Yes. So we will not have any more bench capacity. Is that right?
That's correct. So then going forward, so when we're, for instance, we're looking at tax year 2024, our option would be an increase over the 23 levy of up to 1%.
Anybody, Council Member Reed?
Thank you, Mayor. It wouldn't be budget session if at this time of year I didn't have some concerns with the tax increase. First of all, I'm thankful that we have been fortunate to have another year of sales tax revenue surplus, significantly over our projections. That's always a great discussion to have. I am concerned about the tax increase during hyperinflation and a possible recession, and combine that with legislation that goes into effect the beginning of the year. Studies are showing that fuel cost is going to increase as much as 46 cents per gallon over what it already is, or what it could be at that time. Families are already struggling to adjust to the current situation and the current challenges of the economy now. And I think raising taxes to accommodate increased spending, I'm not okay with that at this time.
Councilmember Newman.
What did we do? Thank you. What did we do to notify people of the public hearing?
The notice for public hearing is like any other public hearing. It's published on our website, the newspaper, and e-news.
Okay, and then what information was included, particularly in the e-news?
It hasn't gone out yet. It should be going out this week, I believe, because we're having a public hearing. But it'll be the full max, the 9.5%.
Okay. Thank you. And then I struggle or am torn because I understand that we're experiencing inflation just like everyone else. And so because we have those unmet needs, but also we have a large population, I suspect, of homeowners who bought their homes when they were $200,000 or less, you know, and weren't paying the same property taxes that they are now. I would like to see what like a 1.5 or 2% increase looks like, if that's possible. At some point, obviously, like not tonight, but
We might add that for you tonight.
okay. Thank you.
In the meantime, do we have any other? Nope. Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you, Mayor. We did, as Cassandra mentioned, hash this over at the Finance Committee meeting. I guess it was last week, wasn't it?
Yes.
It was so much fun. Time flies. The bottom line is, with all due respect to Councilmember Reed's comment, and I totally agree that there are some homeowners who may be behind the 8 ball with different expenses and the cost of living. But I also know that there are a lot of areas where funding is made available, whether it's COVID relief or unemployment relief or waiving student loan payments. And the ones from the committee that talked about this resolved themselves to this increase because we can't stand to not have money to buy things or to cover costs of things with equipment falling apart and buildings falling apart, because it's going to cost a whole lot more later than it is now. If you look at the total impact on that last slide, well, it's not up there anymore. The average homeowner impact, $60, $61 a year. That's peanuts. They would spend more money on coffee than that amount. And I just think that we have to maintain our goal of giving the city the funds that it needs to maintain operation. We have cut the budget, and go back to that pie chart that Cassandra listed in here. The red amounts are all voter approved. Is that right, Cassandra?
Yes, sir.
Voter approved amounts. So if they think that they can save money, when the city gets 8% of their property tax dollar, they should not vote these things in. That's a lot of money right there. 8% is all Sumner gives. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go back to Cassandra before we take Patrick and Pat Cole.
Thank you very much. So this is the base spreadsheet that I use to calculate a variety of different options. So Councilmember Newman, so here's 1%. We also calculated it 3.6. And then I plugged in 2.5%. And so this gives you coming down what the additional levy is. This row for additional levy is the amount over the tax year 2022 levy. Additional revenue from NC&I is the same regardless of the percentage. And the same with administrative refunds. Gives us the total levy. This is the increase from 2022, the levy rate. And this down here, this is the city portion of the 2023 property tax. So this is calculated by the average single family resident assessed valuation provided by the county, divided by 1,000, multiplied by the levy rate. And then the change from the 22 levy annually and the change by month. So I apologize, it's just a great big list of numbers, but that really is the raw data. And I'm happy to answer any questions on that.
Councilmember Cole.
Yes, so I just wanted to say that I, as a part of the Finance and Personnel Committee, that yes, I heard this presentation last week, and I totally agree with the 9.5%, mostly because it really is $61 really is not a lot of money when you think on an annual basis. But on top of that, and to me, this is the biggest part, is that for low income and senior citizens, that this will be it can be subsidized. So to me, there are options for those who really would struggle to pay that extra $61. Thank you.
Jason.
I just want to add a point of clarification. I've heard several council members say it's $61 a year, which is technically correct, but you really need to look at the change between 1% and 9.5%. It's actually $37 a year, because if we just take the 1% that we've always taken, it already accounts for $23.53 of that $60. So really,
That's even, okay, that's even better. Thank you.
Councilmember Reed.
Thank you, Mayor. This is actually a question for Cassandra. So this 9.5% increase was not factored in our existing updates that we've been getting from departments?
Correct.
Okay, so it would be to go toward the items that had already been deemed outside of the current budget structure.
That's
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. That's certainly that really is the option, is looking at the list of unmet needs. Council could make the determination to levy the allowable amount, and then with the intention of essentially selecting some of those items to fund with that additional, with the knowledge that you wouldn't necessarily be limited to one-time only items, because as the levy is, if it were to be increased for 2023, then as Mr. Brown noted, in subsequent years, you already have that levied in.
And my other question is, what is the total sales tax surplus amount that that we're either experienced so far or will be projected by the end of the year over what was budgeted?
So right now, looking at our receipts through September, so we've got 9 months of data, I'm projecting anywhere between 900,000 and 1.1 million over our budgeted amount. And then, as we noted earlier, really what our recommendation will be going forward is really tapping into that as the funding source for the remediation at Heritage Park. So yes, we're anticipating an amount over what we initially budgeted for 2022. Ideally, we'll be able to use that to offset that project, so we won't be looking at having that fall into fund balance.
Thank you.
Councilmember Newman.
Thank you. I just have a question again about the information going to be included in the public notification. And that is, I'm wondering if there is a prominent reminder to people that that only 8% of their property taxes go to the city of Sumner, so that when they get the notification of a proposal, that they don't think that they're increasing, their entire property tax bill is increasing by almost 10%.
Yeah, we'll do our best to message that. I mean, public notices are very rigid in what we can say and what we can't say, but we can certainly add additional information to our website that if they click
In
on
the
it.
e-newsletter, I assume we have more flexibility.
We do.
Thank you.
And that's a good point. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great point.
Deputy Mayor Hochstetter.
Thank you, Mayor. I think that what the Finance Committee came up with is a very livable program for most people, most homeowners. And what I don't want to see is us get way behind on services. I understand when we're behind that everything just ends up costing us more, and we're just behind the gun, always doing that catch up, and it just makes the work for the staff and for the citizens, their lifestyles, it makes them worse. So my other question would be about the council fund that we'd had before. I'm wondering if you still think that's a valuable program for us to put the extra in and then pull from as important needs come up. I mean, it made us feel secure that we knew that we weren't just spreading it all out and spending it once. We were setting it aside. We got to carefully consider things and vote on them. So I felt it worked well. So I just wanted to know what your opinion was on that.
So I'm going to take that because I got to talk about this at Finance and Personnel Committee. I firmly believe that creating the Council Strategic Reserve Fund 4 years ago was one of the most innovative and visionary things this council has ever done. And I say that because it has allowed us to catapult projects forward much faster than we would ever been able to do going out and seeking grant funds, if we could have even gotten grant funds for some of these projects. And that is the opportunity that we are hoping to build with accessing this bank capacity. And I think that's one of the biggest misnomers that the public doesn't understand is bank capacity is not meaning that we are banking it and we get to access those funds at a future date. It is truly lost opportunity costs to invest in infrastructure, equipment, and other capital projects that meet council strategic priorities.
Okay, thank you.
So Deputy Mayor Hochstatter, the numbers that you see before you, and thank you for bringing that up because the draft resolution that we have does continue both the City Council Strategic Reserve as well as the appropriation for a particular, a specific levy amount to be dedicated towards street operations and street capital. So, and that's a decision that council certainly needs to make is, are we directed to continue those specific levy amounts for the council strategic reserve as well as the street funding? But currently they are both in the resolution as drafted.
Councilmember Brown.
Yeah, I'm personally in favor of using a lower band amount, that maybe 6%. It's only 130,000 less revenue. And so I'm in favor of a lower amount. It gives us spend capacity in the future. And I bet we have inflation next year and the next year. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Think we're good?
Thank you very much.
So as a reminder, the next steps will be holding our public hearing next week. And then on October 24th, correct? We'll be continuing the property tax discussion as well as covering that shorter list of unfunded items, since they do kind of go hand in hand.
Okay, and then we'll have action scheduled for
Yes.
November the 7th.
Thank you.
That'll come before you by resolution. And then we'll certify by November 30th.
All right, thank you. So we have no executive session. City Administrator report.
Nothing tonight, Mayor.
Nothing there. Do we have any council meeting agenda? Councilmember Hochstetter.
Yes, were we going to work on filling the committees that have been vacated?
Yes, that's on next Monday's meeting.
Oh, it's on next Monday?
Yep,
All right,
the regular
thank you.
council meeting.
So does that affect any upcoming committee meetings? Okay.
Thank you for
Right.
checking.
Any other agenda issues? Seeing none. Oh. There we are.
Thanks. I just want to clarify, I think last time you mentioned that there was not an ARPA meeting this month, but I saw that it's still on the agenda calendar. So I just wanted to clarify which one.
Thank you. Yes, that's my fault because I forgot to notify them to remove it. But yeah, there is no ARPA committee meeting.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Do you have something, Kurt? No, okay. Council meeting, committee meeting calendar, any committee issues? right. Seeing none, it is 8:08 and we are adjourned.